Yeah, so what she does is she analyzes the frequencies in the sound files and sort of picks different breaks in the frequency levels, and then if it's and maps those to the grid that she's putting into the loom. Because you program these looms, you get this grid of black and white, and black means that the harness is raised, white means the harness is down, and that controls which whether the lengthwise or crosswise thread is on top. And so she kind of decides which frequency she's looking for, and then maps whether or not they're there at various points in the song. This is a project that's just a little bit silly, but I thought it was fun. This guy has taken needlepoint and created a needlepoint Apple II. It's not actually an electronic project, but it's got these removable cards for Google and a couple other things like the Windows wait timer that slip in the top. The News Knitter is a really interesting project. It uses an industrial knitting machine, and it takes headlines from the AP Newswire and just spits them out in cloth. It's actually written using processing. It's one of processing's kind of exciting heralded look at us, we're processing sort of projects. But I think it's really fascinating, and they're actually even selling some of the garments made from it. Knitting machines in general, by the way, are a lot of fun. They're sort of waiting to be hacked. They're this neglected technology. People lost interest in them in the 80s. And the machine that both Bree and I have, which is a KH930, has an I/O port on the back, which at one point interfaced with a 5-inch floppy, and now interfaces with nothing, and the cables are very simple and very expensive. So it's kind of waiting for someone to tackle that and figure out what those pins do. So the kind of state of the crafting community. Crafting community is a lot like the hacker community, but flipped. There's not a lot of girls at this conference. I'm sure some of you noticed the lines for the men's room are very long, lines for the women's room are very short. Craft shows are the opposite. My boyfriend loves going to craft shows because the line for the men's room is non-existent. It's very much, like the genders are flipped, but otherwise it's very similar. Why are you crafting? Well, because I want to I just want to make something, like, whatever. The idea of wanting to understand how something was made, to make it with your own hands, get a better appreciation for it. Sometimes it's just because what you want is not available. I'm sure you guys have experienced that with software or hardware. Nobody's making what you want. Same thing happens in crafts. Sometimes you just don't want to pay what someone else wants you to pay for it, and you can do it better a lot more easily. Or it's just something to do. I think all of us sort of have a need to do something that's not play video games all the time, although that's totally acceptable. And they share a lot of common needs, especially for people who live in large cities, small apartments. It can be really hard to find a place to work. It can be really hard to find a place to put giant tools. Not a lot of people have room for a drill press in their apartment. If you do, that's fantastic. I'll move in with you. But the need for community. It can be really isolating to work on some of these projects that are not necessarily a group project. Knitting is not exactly a multi-person activity. But it is nice to have other people around, much like when you're coding or working on a circuit and you're beating your head against the wall, why is this not working? And your friend walks over and flips a switch, and then you're on your way again. The same thing happens in crafts. So I'm just going to flip through what I consider material hacking. These are projects that are not electronic in nature, but are where people have taken an existing technique or material and done something different with it. Something kind of beyond its original purpose. The first is it's a necklace. It's made out of an inner tube, and she actually cuts them by hand, taking like a bicycle tube and forming them. The next one is a bracelet. The little colored paper there, the colored bits in the middle is actually folded magazine pages in between metal. The lamp on the bottom, I think it's made out of I'm not sure if it's a crock pot or a rice cooker, but it's been repurposed as a lamp. The rose is made out of coffee filters, and the bracelet there is actually, that's fabric that's been folded and sewn so much that it actually has a very dimensional and stable quality, and you can squish it and it pops right back up. They're kind of incredible. Machine embroidering is another hack, and by machine embroidery, I don't mean the big machines where you punch in a design and you download, precious moments, children smiling, number 53, and it puts it on a shirt. This is actually freehand machine embroidery. It's a technique that's been adapted from sock darning. So darning is something no one does anymore, but if you get a hole in your jeans, you put it on the machine, run it all around, covers it in stitches, hole is patched. It's been adapted for creating dimensional images. So this image here is actually done entirely on the freehand knitting machine. So she just took a big loop, and it's sort of hard to explain, but the fiber goes everywhere, and they're a lot of fun to watch. Cake hacking is another fun one. My friend Alicia did these. The first one is just a light up LED cake. Kind of makes the candles hard to blow out, but still fun. The second one is a servo motor cake for a friend of ours who does a lot of work with servos, and the birthday candles actually spin around. And then the last one, Alicia did for her boyfriend, Dino, who's a fairly well-known security guy. She iced the message, "Happy Birthday," which was encoded with his public PGP key. And now you all know how old he is. So open source crafting is a very, well, not very, but comparatively new thing. It's similar to open source software in a lot of ways. It's the idea that these techniques, which sometimes have been very well guarded, sometimes for centuries, are coming out in the open. And that if you're running a business, what you're selling is not, oh, well, I'm the only person who knows how to make a vase. It's just that my vases are so much better than yours, I can tell you how to do it, I don't care. And there's a couple different communities that are really fostering that environment. The first is Craftster, which it's actually just a discussion board. It sort of grew amorphously of its own thing. It was one of the first ones out there when there weren't really a lot of resources for crafters online, and people who were stuck at home or otherwise looking for a sense of community came to the site, and they'll post total instructions. They'll post a project they did and instructions on how they did them. This one is a lamp made out of Legos. A couple other sites include Ravelry, which I'm not sure how many of you attended Bree's talk on rapid prototyping, but there's a site called Thingiverse where you can upload digital files of things you've done, and other people download and make them themselves. Ravelry is like that, but for knitting and crocheting. So I can upload a pattern for knitting, and someone else can download it and then make one, and then post a photo of the thing they've done. So it's this awesome repository and community of just fiber patterns. So if I want to make a hat, I type in hat, and suddenly I see all of these images of all of these hats that I can download and make. The other awesome thing about the shared mentality between crafting and hacking is that it's a really easy way of getting people interested in the technology side of things. One of our most popular events at NYC Resistor is Craft and Hack Night. It's actually mostly women, and we're very proud of the fact that we can say that our most popular public event at our hackerspace is mostly chicks. And it's awesome because it's been kind of astounding the number of people who came in and said, oh, I'm just going to knit in the corner. And then the next week said, oh, well, can I put some LEDs on that? And then, oh, well, how does a servo motor work? And admittedly, that's kind of how I got into it. As I said, yeah, I'll show you how to use a knitting machine, and hey, what are you doing with that Arduino? So these are just a couple simple projects, varying levels of simplicity. The one on the left is a ceramic alien sort of thing with light up eyes, simple LED project. The one On the right is actually, it's a dress, and it's covered in electroluminescent wire. And as the wearer walks, there's an accelerometer that changes the brightness of the flames on the dress. It's a little bit hard to see in that picture, but it's a lot of really fun stuff. Another way that people are really starting to get into this is the wide availability of kits. Kits have become insanely popular. And actually the popularity of kits has actually been, I think, helped by the recession, at least in the US. The New York Times was reporting that companies that sell crafting supplies, like craft supply stores, have actually had a better holiday season in past years. And I think part of it is that people see a lot of value in, the sort of do-it-yourself mojo when there's not a lot of cash to spend. So these are just some basic kits that I found on the internet that I think are kind of good gateway projects for people who are getting interested in hacking. The first one is a Twitchy kit. It's actually made by my friend Raf. And what they are is a servo kit, and you make a nice soft case for it. Like in this case, it's a scorpion. I've seen one that was like a little green monster. I also saw one that was half of a baby doll. And if you really want to disturb someone, hand them half of a twitching baby doll. Gets them every time. So, and the next one is just Blinky Bug. It's a super simple project that introduces people to basic concepts like this is what happens when you attach an LED to a battery. And the LED menorah is a really fun one. It's a microcontroller that you solder the LEDs to, and every time you turn it on, one more lights up. And then the flowers, just again, really simple LED project. LEDs are really popular for intro crafting projects. They look cool, they're easy, they're cheap, and it's really hard to hurt yourself with them. Which, as someone who got her fair share of burns in metalsmithing school, it's a good thing. So two of the best things I think that the hacker, or in general, that can kind of bring hacking to more crafty or otherwise uninitiated people are Arduino and processing. I know a lot of people get really snobby about Arduino and processing. I hear a lot of, processing's not a real language. Arduino is so much lamer than this other. Get over it. I think that the rampant, it's not helpful. I think that, yes, they're limited. Yeah, it's programming on training wheels and microcontrollers on training wheels. But not everyone has access to the same background that everyone else did. Not everyone has the patience to sit down and figure out how to use the GCC compiler. If you do, and that's fantastic, but I think everyone starts at different places. And I know for me, the idea of sitting down with a microcontroller, I had some like TI kit, AVR programmer, and I was like, I don't get this, I'm out. And then a couple years later, I sat down with an Arduino, and I was like, oh, this makes sense. So this is a project I did in processing. I don't know if any of you guys saw Bree's discussion on rapid prototyping where he drew a little design in CAD. I personally hate CAD programs. I'm not willing to learn how to use them. I'm not willing to learn how to use them so much that I was willing to learn processing to draw the files for me. These are origami boxes. I make these tiny dinosaurs, and I needed a box for them. And I didn't want to have to draw it over and over to get the sizes I wanted. So I actually wrote a program in processing to generate it for me. If anyone is too snobby to use processing or just doesn't like it, there's also a very similar library in Python, which I've started documenting. I found it on the web. There really wasn't a lot of documentation for it. I threw some up on my blog. If anybody else, can do a better job, you're welcome to. But I was learning Python as I went along. Sorry. I'm supposed to turn the sound off so you wouldn't hear the bad music we listen to at NYCR sometimes. So this is actually one of the earlier hardware projects that I did with just light and using processing to generate objects. So again, I did